Poor girl texts CEO by mistake, asking for baby formula money. What he did next shocked everyone. Please, it's just baby formula. I don't know what else to do. Hannah pressed send with trembling fingers, her last hope wrapped inside a desperate text. The number she typed belonged to a friend who had once promised to help. But in her exhaustion, in the blur of hunger and sleepless nights, she misdealed. The message didn't go to her friend. It went to Ethan Cole, billionaire CEO. He was sitting in his glass office tower when his phone buzzed. Another deal, he thought. Another demand. But when he opened the message, he froze. The words weren't about money. In text, the night was cold. Hannah sat at the edge of her worn mattress knees, pulled to her chest, her baby Oliver, stirring restlessly in the crib beside her. The room smelled faintly of damp and old plaster, the kind of place where hope withered under flickering bulbs and peeling wallpaper. She had counted the coins 3 times already. They barely added up to a few loaves of bread. Certainly not enough for the formula Oliver needed. Her phone screen glowed faintly in the dark. She scrolled through old contacts' names she hadn't dared reach out to in months. Shame was heavier than hunger. But tonight, with Oliver crying softly, his tiny fists clenched, shame no longer mattered. Only survival did. Her thumb hovered over one name, Lydia, an old co-worker who had once offered help if she ever needed it. Hannah typed, typed again. Finally she wrote, "Please, it's just baby formula. I don't know what else to do." Her heart pounded as she pressed send. For a long moment she sat frozen, waiting for the dots of a reply. None came. Instead, Oliver's whimpers grew louder, and Hannah buried her face in her hands. In the tower, miles away, high above the city skyline, Ethan Cole sat alone in his office. Midnight meetings had long since ended, but he preferred the silence of the skyscraper at night. The hum of the heater, the city lights beneath him, it all numbed the ache of memories he rarely let surface. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it absently, expecting another email from a restless investor. But when he read the notification, he froze. "Please, it's just baby formula. I don't know what else to do." For a long moment, Ethan didn't breathe. His first thought was that it was a scam. He had received thousands of messages over the years, please threats, scams dressed as charity. But this one was different. No bank account number, no elaborate story, just raw broken words. He read it again, and again. The first reply. On the other side of the city, Hannah's phone buzzed. She blinked at the screen through tired eyes. Unknown number. Who is this? Her heart sank. She reread her sent message and realized with horror that she must have typed Lydia's number wrong. She typed quickly, "I'm sorry. Wrong number. Please ignore." Her finger hovered over delete conversation, but then another message appeared. Unknown number. You need baby formula. Hannah hesitated. Her breath caught in her throat. Whoever this was, they weren't mocking her. They were asking. "Yes," she typed cautiously, "but I'll manage. I didn't mean to bother you." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then finally, "Where are you?" A stranger's curiosity. Ethan set the phone down, running a hand through his hair. Something inside him resisted. He had no business responding. He should have ignored it. But the words clung to him, pulling at a wound he had buried beneath wealth and power. He remembered another night years ago when his sister Lena had whispered to him that the store. The street corner still felt unreal, as if Hannah had stepped into a dream she was afraid to wake from. She held Oliver tighter, his small body warm against hers, while Ethan Cole stood in front of her like a figure cut out of a magazine, polished, powerful, impossibly out of place in her world. For a moment, neither spoke. The city moved around them, cars rushing, strangers passing. And then Ethan gestured toward the car. "Come," he said simply. "There's a store nearby." Hannah hesitated. Every instinct warned her, strangers don't hand out kindness without a price. But then Oliver whimpered softly, and her decision was made for her. She nodded, climbing carefully into the back seat. Ethan slid in across from her, his presence filling the space. A ride of silence. The car glided through the streets, warm and quiet. Hannah kept her gaze on Oliver, avoiding Ethan's eyes. She couldn't reconcile what was happening. The man beside her belonged to another world entirely. Why had he answered her? Why had he come? Ethan, for his part, watched her discreetly. She was younger than he expected, her features tired but determined. The kind of woman who had seen too much too soon. He thought of Lena again, and his chest tightened. Finally he spoke. "How old is he?" 8 months, Hannah said softly. "He looks strong." She managed a small smile. "Stronger than me." Ethan didn't reply, but the words stayed with him. Inside the store. The car stopped outside a quiet supermarket. Ethan stepped out first, then offered his hand to help Hannah. She shook her head quickly and managed on her own, clutching Oliver close as they entered. The bright fluorescent lights felt harsh after the snow outside. Hannah's cheeks burned. She was used to slipping through aisles unnoticed, buying only the bare minimum with coins counted twice. Now she walked beside a man whose watch probably cost more than she'd earned in years. Ethan grabbed a basket, but when Hannah reached for it, he shook his head. "Take what you need. I'll carry it." The words stunned her. She wanted to protest, to insist she wasn't here to take advantage. But Oliver fussed again, and instinct won over pride. She led him to the baby aisle. The baby aisle. Hannah reached automatically for the smallest can of formula, the one she always bought the cheapest. But Ethan's voice stopped her. "Why that one?" "It's affordable," she muttered. He picked up a larger brand, high quality, double the price. "This is better." "I can't." "You're not paying," Ethan said firmly. Hannah's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to tell him she wasn't looking for charity. But then Oliver stretched his tiny fingers toward the can in Ethan's hand, as if sensing what it meant. And Hannah's resistance crumbled. They filled the basket, formula, baby food, diapers, wipes. More than Hannah had dared dream of buying at once. Each item felt like both a blessing and a weight pressing down on her chest. At the register. At the checkout, Hannah's heart pounded as the cashier. Unwanted echoes. The snow had stopped by morning, but the city remained heavy gray and unforgiving. Hannah sat cross-legged on the floor of her apartment, staring at the unopened can of formula on the table. Oliver slept peacefully for the first time in days, his tiny chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Her mind, however, would not rest. She replayed every second of the night before. The tall man, the quiet voice, the certainty with which he had stepped into her life. Ethan Cole. She still couldn't believe it had been him. A billionaire in her grocery aisle. A man whose face belonged on magazine covers, not in her crumbling building. Why had he done it? Hannah rubbed her temples. She hated herself for how easily she had let him take control, choosing the more expensive formula, swiping his card-carrying bags up to her door. She should have said no, should have walked away. Pride had always been the only thing she had left. And yet, Oliver's contented breathing was proof that pride had no place in survival. Still, her chest ached with confusion, gratitude, fear, and something else she couldn't name. Ethan's tower. High above the city, Ethan sat at his desk. Papers spread out, But none of the numbers would hold still. His mind wasn't in the contracts or projections. It was still in that small apartment hallway, in the way Hannah had looked at him, not with admiration, not even with awe, but with disbelief. He wasn't used to that. People always wanted something from him: money, power, influence. They praised him, feared him, envied him. Hannah had only looked confused. And when she had asked why he did it, he had almost told her the truth. Almost told her about Lena, about the night she died alone in a hospital room while he sat in a meeting chasing a deal that suddenly meant nothing. His jaw tightened. He had sworn never to let that weakness show again, never to let grief dictate his choices. And yet, here he was, haunted by the sound of a young mother's trembling voice. A text unsent. Hannah picked up her phone 3 times that morning. Each time she typed a message. Each time she deleted it. Thank you again. I don't know what to say. Oliver slept well last night. Because of you. Her thumb hovered over send before shame stopped her. What if he thought she was asking for more? What if he regretted helping her already? She tossed the phone aside and buried her face in her hands. She wasn't supposed to feel this way, tethered to a stranger whose world would never accept her. Ethan's restlessness. By afternoon, Ethan was restless. Meetings blurred. Assistants brought coffee. Whispers in the hallway. The building was alive with whispers. Hannah felt them before she heard them. Eyes lingered longer in the hallway. Doors cracked open wider as she passed. Once the neighbors had ignored her, at best offering a half nod, while she carried Oliver up 3 flights of stairs with groceries clutched in her arms. Now they stared. She knew why. It had started the morning after Ethan's second visit. She'd gone downstairs to collect the laundry Oliver perched on her hip. Mrs. Novak from the second floor leaned in, her perfume sharp and her eyes bright with curiosity. "Busy night, dear?" she asked casually. Hannah frowned. "Excuse me." The man in the suit, Mrs. Novak said, lowering her voice theatrically. Tall, handsome. "Left your door around 10 last night. Don't worry, I don't judge." She winked. Heat rushed to Hannah's cheeks. "It's not what you think," she said quickly. But Mrs. Novak was already heading upstairs, whispering to Mr. Romanov as she passed. By the end of the day, the whole building knew. The weight of rumors. By evening, Hannah couldn't step outside without feeling the weight of their stares. They weren't cruel, exactly, just curious. Some even looked impressed, as though she had done something remarkable by catching the attention of a man like Ethan Cole. But to Hannah, it felt suffocating. She had worked so hard to keep her life private, to protect Oliver from pity or gossip. Now all it took was one billionaire in a hallway for the walls to crack. She sat by the window watching snow fall past the dim streetlight, whispering to her son, "They don't understand, Ollie. He's not mine. He doesn't belong here." And yet, deep down, part of her feared he might. Ethan at the office. Ethan had heard whispers too, not from neighbors, but from his staff. His assistant Claire raised an eyebrow after catching him distracted twice in one morning. "You've been different lately," she said carefully. "Different," he repeated, flipping through reports. "Distracted, restless. Dare I say, human." He shot her a look, but she only smiled knowingly. "Who is she?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. But when he closed his office door, the image that surfaced wasn't of boardrooms or shareholders. It was of a young woman holding a child, looking at him like she couldn't decide if he was her savior or her downfall. A visit uninvited. The next evening, Ethan returned to Hannah's building. He told himself it was practical. He wanted to check if she needed anything else. But when he stepped into the hallway, voices hushed. The air felt charged with speculation. He knocked, and when Hannah opened the door, her expression was tight. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, glancing down the hall. Ethan frowned. "Why not?" "Because they're talking," she said sharply. "Everyone. They think," her voice faltered, "they think you and I—" For the first time, Ethan seemed at a loss. He looked at her, then at Oliver, who reached out a chubby hand toward him. "They can think what they want," Ethan said finally. "What matters is you and your son." But Hannah shook her head. "You don't understand. You can walk away from rumors. I can't." Pulling away. The morning after their clash, Hannah woke with a pit in her stomach. Oliver was babbling in his crib, his little fists clutching the rail, but even his joy couldn't silence the heaviness pressing on her chest. The hallway whispers had only grown louder. Overnight she had heard them when she tiptoed to take out the trash. Mrs. Novak's door creaked, and a hushed voice muttered to another neighbor, "The billionaire again. Must be more than charity." Her cheeks burned. She couldn't let this spiral, so she made a decision distance. Ethan Cole could not become part of her life. Not really. Not in any way that lasted. Ignoring the messages. Her phone buzzed that afternoon. "Ethan, how's Oliver today?" Hannah stared at the screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Every fiber of her wanted to respond, to share the silly thing Oliver had done with his spoon at breakfast, to send a photo of his gummy smile. But instead, she locked the phone and shoved it under a pile of laundry. An hour later, it buzzed again. "Ethan, did you get the groceries sorted? Do you need anything else?" Her lips trembled. She typed out, "We're fine. Thank you," then deleted it. Silence was safer. Silence created space. Ethan's frustration. At his office downtown, Ethan tapped his pen against a contract irritation simmering beneath his calm exterior. He wasn't used to being ignored, not in business, not in life. But with Hannah, everything was different. She didn't want his money, didn't want his name, didn't even want to answer his messages. He told himself to let her be, to respect her space. But the image of Oliver clutching his finger, of Hannah whispering, "I don't know how to let you stay," refused to leave him. So instead of pressing, Ethan did what he was best at: strategizing. If Hannah wouldn't let him in through the front door, maybe he could quietly support her from behind the scenes. The envelope. 2 days later, Hannah found an envelope slipped under her door. No name, no handwriting, just plain white. Inside was a receipt, Oliver's doctor's appointment from last month, marked paid in full. Her heart lurched. She hadn't told anyone about the overdue bill. She had been paying it off in tiny installments, terrified the clinic would cut them off. Her chest tightened. She knew who it was. She sank to the floor. Oliver in her lap, the receipt crumpled in her fist. Part of her wanted to scream, how dare he cross that boundary without asking. But another part whispered relief. It wasn't just about formula. He wanted her son safe, healthy, and for a moment she let herself breathe. An unexpected sight. The following evening, as Hannah walked back from the corner store with Oliver bundled in her arms, she froze at the sight ahead. Ethan wasn't at her door. He wasn't waiting in the hallway. He was outside, standing near the rusted playground at the end of the block, talking to a group of neighborhood kids. They clustered around him, laughing, as he listened, his expensive coat dusted with snow. Hannah stood still, her heart pounding. He didn't notice her right away. He was kneeling down, handing a boy a pair of new mittens, ruffling his hair like he belonged there. When worlds collide, the fragile balance did not last long. For a few precious weeks, Ethan respected the distance. He didn't flood Hannah with messages. He didn't overstep with grand gestures. He was simply near, a quiet presence who sometimes appeared at the playground, or outside the grocery store, or on the park bench where Hannah rocked Oliver to sleep. It was almost enough, until one snowy evening, Hannah walked into the corner store and froze. On the front page of a glossy tabloid under the bold headline, "Cold CEO Warms Up," was a picture of Ethan. Not at a gala, not at a boardroom, but standing outside her building, holding Oliver in his arms. Her stomach dropped. Hannah's panic. By the time she returned to the apartment, her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the keys. She tossed the magazine onto the table, the headline screaming back at her. "They know Ollie," she whispered, clutching her son to her chest. "They know about us." Neighbors could whisper. She could handle that. But this was the world of paparazzi tabloids. Stories twisted into spectacle. It was a world she had never touched, and one she had no protection against. And worst of all, it wasn't just about her. It was about Oliver, his face, his safety. Ethan confronted. When Ethan arrived later that evening, Hannah didn't let him in. She met him in the hallway, thrusting the magazine at his chest. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice shaking. Ethan glanced down, his expression unreadable. "It's nothing. Tabloids invent stories every week." "Nothing," she spat. "That's my son in your arms. That's our life on display. Like it's some kind of soap opera." He exhaled slowly. "Hannah, I didn't call them. I didn't want this. But when you're me, cameras follow. Everywhere." Her eyes filled with tears. "Then this is exactly why you can't be near. You bring the world with you, Ethan, and the world will destroy us." Ethan's conflict. Back in his penthouse that night, Ethan stood before the wall of glass that overlooked the city. Lights glittered below like 1,000 tiny stars. For the first time in years, the city felt hostile. He had built empires, crushed rivals, and shaped headlines to his will. But this protecting a fragile, ordinary life was beyond his control. He thought of Hannah's face, her fear. He thought of Oliver's small hand gripping his finger. For the first time, Ethan questioned whether his presence was more poison than cure. Hannah's withdrawal. In the days that followed, Hannah withdrew completely. She didn't answer Ethan's texts. She didn't open the door when he knocked. She avoided the grocery store at night, afraid of cameras lurking outside. She told herself it was for Oliver's safety, that cutting Ethan off was the only way to shield her son from a life of flashing bulbs and invasive headlines. But late at night, when Oliver finally slept, Hannah lay awake staring at the ceiling, her chest aching with something she refused to name: loneliness. Because for all the chaos Ethan brought, he had also brought warmth. And now, the public step. The silence couldn't last. Not in a city that fed on stories. Every morning, Hannah prayed the tabloids would move on, that Ethan's face would be replaced by another celebrity scandal, another corporate feud. But each trip to the corner store proved otherwise. His name lingered on headlines. His photo, sometimes alone, sometimes blurred with Oliver's little frame, refused to fade. And every night Hannah lay awake, wondering if she had done the right thing cutting him out. The gala invitation. The breaking point came with an envelope slid beneath her door. At first she thought it was another bill. But when she opened it, her breath caught. A heavy card embossed in silver. Coal Industries' annual winter gala. Her name, Hannah Brooks, printed clearly beneath the words, "Guest of Honor." She stared at it, heart racing. Guest of Honor. It had to be a mistake, a cruel joke. But no, the signature at the bottom was unmistakable. Ethan's gamble. Meanwhile, in his glass tower, Ethan braced himself. "Are you out of your mind?" Claire snapped, slamming a folder onto his desk. "Inviting her into that world. You're throwing her into the fire." That's the point, Ethan replied calmly. Claire blinked. Excuse me? If they want to watch, let them watch. But they'll see the truth on my terms, not whispered in alleys or printed in gossip columns. And what truth is that she challenged? Ethan's jaw tightened. That she's not some scandal. She's important. For a long moment, Claire studied him, then exhaled. If you do this, there's no going back. I know, he said quietly, and neither do I want to. Hannah's fear. When Ethan showed up that evening, Hannah didn't let him speak first. Are you insane, she hissed, waving the invitation. You want me to stand beside you in front of cameras, flashing lights, strangers with microphones. That's the life I've been hiding from Ethan. He met her eyes steadily. You've been hiding from fear, Hannah. And fear has already stolen too much from you. Her breath caught. Don't twist this. This isn't about courage. This is about survival for me, for Oliver. If they drag us into your world, we'll drown. His voice softened. Not if I'm holding you up. The decision. For days the card sat on her table untouched. Neighbors gossiped louder. Even Mrs. Novak pressed her lips tight, clearly aware something was stirring. Hannah told herself she wouldn't go. She rehearsed excuses. She even drafted a text, "Thank you, but I can't." But each night when Oliver finally slept, she found her eyes drifting to the card again. Guest of honor. Something in her chest whispered, maybe it's time they saw you. Not as pity, not as scandal, but as someone who belongs. So, on the night of the gala, Hannah stood in front of the mirror in the dress Ethan had quietly arranged to be delivered. Deep blue, simple, but elegant. She barely recognized herself. Her hands shook as she whispered to Oliver, "It's just one night, baby. One night to see if the world can hold us." The gala. The ballroom shimmered with gold. A life rewritten. Snow still clung to the city streets the morning after the gala, but something inside Hannah felt lighter, almost fragile. She had stood beneath chandeliers, had survived the flashes, the whispers, the scrutiny. She had walked into Ethan's world and hadn't collapsed under its weight. But now, back in her tiny apartment with Oliver asleep on her chest, reality returned. Could she truly belong there? Or was last night only an illusion, one spun by Tuxedo's speeches and Ethan's unwavering grip on her hand? The morning headlines. By sunrise, the tabloids were everywhere. But this time, the story was different. Instead of cheap scandal, the headlines read, "Cold CEO shows his heart. Ethan Cole defends mystery woman she matters. From boardroom to ballroom, a new side of a titan." Hannah stared at the papers in disbelief. For once, her face wasn't blurred in the shadows. It was right there, clear-centered, undeniable. And strangely, it wasn't cruel. The angle of the photos, the tone of the articles, Ethan's words had shifted the narrative. She wasn't a scandal. She was human. The visit. That afternoon, a knock rattled her door. She opened it to find Ethan not in a suit, not polished for cameras, but in a simple coat, snow melting on his shoulders. He held nothing but a small paper bag from the bakery down the street. "Croissants," he said, almost shy, "and hot chocolate." Hannah blinked. For all the grandeur of last night, this him showing up with something warm and ordinary was what disarmed her most. "Come in," she whispered. The conversation. They sat at her wobbly kitchen table, Oliver babbling in his high chair, crumbs scattering across the floor. Ethan leaned forward, his hands clasped. "I need you to know something. Last night wasn't strategy. It wasn't PR. It was me telling the truth for once." Hannah studied him, her chest tightening. "And what if your truth destroys mine? What if I can't survive your world?" "Then I'll change my world," he said simply. Her breath caught. The words were too big, Too reckless, too impossible, and yet, in his eyes, she saw no performance, only resolve. Hannah's decision. For hours after he left, Hannah paced the apartment. She replayed the gala, the headlines, his words. Could she risk letting him in? Could she give Oliver a life where love was tangled with cameras, with constant eyes? She remembered the coins on the counter, the hunger in Oliver's cry, the nights she thought no one would ever see her. And she remembered Ethan's hand steady through it all. That night, as Oliver slept, Hannah whispered into the dark, maybe survival isn't enough anymore. The answer. The next evening, Hannah showed